My garden was stuck in mediocrity despite years of adding compost, amendments, and, well, everything the experts recommended. Plants grew, sure, but they never thrived the way I imagined. Yields were average, disease pressure was constant, and the soil seemed to need more and more inputs just to maintain baseline productivity. Then I discovered Cowdung Biochar, and within a single growing season, everything changed. The transformation wasn't subtle, it was dramatic, measurable, and honestly shocking in its scope. Today I'm sharing exactly how I make and use this ancient soil amendment that's revolutionizing modern regenerative gardening, and why the specific combination of biochar and cow manure creates results that neither material delivers alone. Biochar is essentially charcoal created specifically for soil application, produced by burning organic material in low oxygen conditions through a process called pyrolysis. What makes Cowdung biochar special compared to wood biochar or other forms is the unique chemical signature that cow manure brings to the final product. Cow manure is already rich in minerals, trace elements, and beneficial compounds, and when it's transformed into biochar through controlled burning, these minerals become concentrated and locked into a stable, porous carbon structure that persists in soil for hundreds or even thousands of years. The resulting material combines biochar's legendary water and nutrient retention properties with an inherent fertility that wood-based biochars simply cannot match. The porous structure of biochar is genuinely remarkable when you understand it at the microscopic level. Every gram of biochar contains millions of tiny pores and cavities, creating surface area that's measured in hundreds of square meters per gram. These pores become homes for beneficial bacteria and fungi, providing protected spaces where microbial communities can establish and thrive away from predation and environmental extremes. The charged surfaces of these pores attract and hold nutrients that would otherwise leach away with rain or irrigation, creating a nutrient reservoir that releases fertility slowly as plants need it. When the base material is cow manure rather than wood, these pores come preloaded with minerals and trace elements, essentially creating a slow-release mineral supplement built into the biochar's structure. The carbon stability of Cowdung biochar addresses one of the fundamental challenges in soil building: how to add organic matter that improves soil without rapidly decomposing and releasing its carbon back to the atmosphere. Fresh compost and manure improve soil temporarily, but they break down within months or a few years at most. Biochar, in contrast, remains stable in soil for centuries because the pyrolysis process has already released the volatile compounds and locked the remaining carbon into aromatic ring structures that microorganisms cannot easily break down. This means every application of Cowdung biochar builds permanent soil improvement, creating cumulative benefits that compound year after year rather than requiring constant reapplication. Making your own Cowdung biochar requires nothing more sophisticated than dried cow manure, a burn barrel or suitable container, and attention to controlling the burning process. Start by sourcing cow manure that's been aged for at least several months. Fresh manure is too wet and doesn't burn cleanly. Many farmers with cattle operations are happy to provide aged manure for free or minimal cost, especially if you're helping them manage their manure piles. Form the dried manure into balls or patties if it's loose material, or break dried cow pies into fist-sized chunks. The goal is pieces large enough to burn slowly rather than flash burning into ash. The key to successful biochar production is limiting oxygen to create smoldering, combustion, rather than open flames that would simply convert everything to ash. I use a 55-gallon steel drum with a removable lid for my biochar making. Fill the drum about 2/3 full with your dried cow manure pieces, leaving space at the top for airflow control. Light the top layer and allow it to burn for 10 to 15 minutes until a good bed of coals establishes. Then partially cover the drum with the lid, leaving just a small gap for minimal air entry. You want to see thin, bluish smoke rather than thick black smoke or bright flames. This indicates the material is pyrolyzing rather than burning completely or smoldering inefficiently. Monitor the process carefully over the next 2 to 4 hours, adjusting the lid position to maintain that ideal smoldering state. The material will slowly char from top to bottom, transforming from brown manure into black, brittle biochar. You'll know it's complete when the smoke turns very thin and nearly invisible, and when you can see that the material has shrunk significantly and turned uniformly black. At this point, Seal the drum completely to cut off oxygen and let it cool overnight. Attempting to cool it with water while still hot can create steam explosions and wastes the biochar, so patience here is, really essential. The next day you'll have several gallons of pure cow dung biochar ready for processing and use. Fresh biochar straight from the burn barrel is not yet ready for garden application because its porous structure is empty. In fact, it will actually draw nutrients out of your soil initially as it fills those pores with water and dissolved minerals. This is why charging biochar before application is crucial for immediate results. Charging simply means preloading the biochar's pore spaces with nutrients and beneficial microorganisms so it enriches rather than depletes your soil. The simplest charging method involves mixing your crushed biochar with compost at a ratio of 1 part biochar to 3 parts compost, moistening the mixture thoroughly and letting it sit for at least 2 weeks. During this time, nutrients from the compost dissolve into the water filling the biochar pores, and microorganisms colonize the pore surfaces. For even more effective charging, I create a biochar slurry using liquid fertilizers or compost tea. Fill a 5-gallon bucket halfway with crushed biochar, then add a mixture of compost tea, fish emulsion, kelp extract, and molasses mixed with water until the biochar is completely submerged. Stir this daily for 1 to 2 weeks and you'll create supercharged biochar that's loaded with both nutrients and beneficial biology. The biochar will sink as its pores fill with liquid, signaling it's becoming fully charged. Drain off excess liquid before application or apply the whole slurry directly to beds. Application rates matter significantly for optimal results. Biochar is not a fertilizer replacement, but a soil amendment that improves the physical and biological properties of your growing medium. For initial applications to new beds or depleted soil, incorporate biochar at a rate of about 10 to 20 pounds per 100 square feet, working it into the top 6 inches of soil. This creates an initial biochar presence throughout the root zone without overwhelming the system. For established beds that are already productive, annual top dressing with 5 to 10 pounds per 100 square feet maintains and builds on previous applications. Mix the biochar thoroughly with compost before spreading to ensure even distribution and to avoid the water-repelling effect that can occur if pure biochar is applied as a surface layer. Within the first few weeks after application, I noticed improved water retention in my sandy soil. Areas that previously dried out quickly between waterings stayed moist noticeably longer. Plants in biochar-amended beds showed deeper green foliage color, indicating improved nutrient availability, even though I hadn't increased fertilizer rates. The soil structure began improving almost immediately as well, with better aggregation and a more crumbly, friable texture that made working the soil easier. By mid-season, the differences became more dramatic. Plants in biochar-amended beds consistently outgrew their counterparts in standard compost-only beds, showing stronger stems, more vigorous growth, and, notably heavier flowering and fruiting. Tomato plants in particular responded extraordinarily, producing 30 to 40% more fruit with better flavor and shelf life. Root vegetables grew larger and more uniform, and leafy greens showed remarkable bolt resistance even during hot weather. I attribute these improvements to the combination of consistent moisture availability, steady nutrient release, and the robust microbial communities thriving in the biochar's porous structure. The long-term benefits revealed themselves over subsequent seasons as the biochar's presence in my soil created compounding improvements. Soil organic matter percentages increased more rapidly than in previous years despite using less compost overall. Disease pressure dropped significantly. Problems with root rot and fungal issues that had plagued certain beds virtually disappeared, likely due to the beneficial microorganisms occupying biochar pores and outcompeting pathogens. Most remarkably, my fertilizer requirements decreased steadily year over year as the biochar's nutrient retention prevented losses to leaching and made nutrients more consistently available to plants. After 3 years of annual biochar applications, my soil tests showed nutrient levels 20 to 30% higher than before I started using biochar, despite reducing my fertilizer inputs by about half. The cost-effectiveness of cow dung biochar becomes apparent when you calculate the long-term return on investment. My initial batch of biochar, made from free cow manure using a recycled steel drum, cost essentially nothing beyond the time to make it. That single batch properly charged and applied, amended about 400 square feet of garden beds. Compare this to the equivalent amount of commercial biochar at retail prices, which would cost several $100s, or the continuous inputs of compost and fertilizer that would be needed to achieve similar soil improvements. The biochar's permanence means I'm building lasting soil capital with each application rather than maintaining baseline fertility through constant additions. The environmental benefits extend far beyond the immediate garden. Every pound of biochar in my soil represents carbon that would have otherwise decomposed and returned to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. By converting cow manure, which would typically decompose or even release methane in anaerobic conditions, into stable biochar, I'm effectively sequestering carbon for centuries, while also capturing the fertility that would have been lost through decomposition. The improved water retention in biochar amended soil reduces my irrigation needs by an estimated 20 to 30%, conserving water while also preventing nutrient runoff that could pollute waterways. The reduced fertilizer requirements similarly prevent the environmental costs associated with fertilizer production and the pollution from fertilizer runoff. Your journey with Cowdung biochar can start as simply as mine did, with curiosity, some dried cow manure, and a commitment to building soil that improves with every season. The transformation you'll witness in your garden's productivity and resilience will convince you that this ancient practice deserves a central place in modern sustainable gardening. If you're ready to revolutionize your soil and join the growing community of gardeners discovering biochar's power, subscribe to the Living Soil Lab, where we explore time-tested techniques backed by modern science. Share this method with fellow gardeners who understand that the best soil amendments work with nature's own processes to create lasting improvements. Here's to gardens that thrive on soil that gets better every year, naturally storing carbon while producing abundance.